Step inside the walls of the 25-year leader in classic and custom boat restorations. Watch as the meticulous craftsmen use the most advanced materials and processes in the industry to restore, repair, and build some of the most beautiful boats on the water, including their own Metan Classic Collection.
Hi folks, I'm Mike Borelli. Here at Metan, we custom build classic style vessels and perform restorations on boats we refer to as the family heirloom. We also take on fiberglass repairs sent to us from across the country with the client's confidence that vessel will be returned better than new. From the very beginning, our work was described as meticulous, and I often told to be anal retentive. And this is Making It Metan. Hello, and welcome back to Making It Metan as we wrap up the repair to our Boston Whaler 420 Outrage. Before we jump into the last few phases of this project, which is the bottom system, assembly, detail, and shrink wrap so it's ready for its voyage back to Texas, let's start with a quick recap of the last 3 episodes. It started with you seeing us dismantle and cut out half the interior, complete the inner hull repair, and put it all back together like we were never there. You then saw us fill a hole in the side of the boat you can drive a small car through. Witness Scotty Van Boezelstein pull off some of his amazing bodywork on the forward bow section. Leading into our last episode with our killer all-grip paint job, finished off with so much Metan glass, you could count your nose hairs in it.
Look at this, 2 Van Boezelsteins.
With that completed, we moved into what we would consider the final phases of the project, one of which is the application of the bottom system. We kept the bottom covered throughout the whole coating process, whether we were gel coating, priming, or painting. We prepped the bottom surfaces along with the other surfaces, all prepping for the final coating process. Well, the bottom system is the final coating process of the bottom surfaces, so we wanted to keep it clean and prepped right up to this point. We use 2 products by Seahawk Coatings for the bottom system. The first is a primer called Tough Stuff. The other is their Color Coat Multi-Season Bottom Paint. Tough Stuff is a 2-part epoxy-based primer which gives the hull 100% water barrier that protects the surfaces from moisture and water penetration, protecting from future blisters. The bottom paint is a newer product for them called Color Coat, which is an ablative paint. More layman's term, self-polishing, kind of like a bar of soap. As the bottom surfaces comes in contact with the running water, thin layer of bottom paint is removed, taking the beginnings of any growth with it. For the boats that may end up staying at the mooring or tied up at the dock for an extended period of time, they incorporated 3 biocides into the product. For years, we used a True Coat product that used the same ablative technology with only 1 biocide, and the stuff worked brilliantly. So one could only expect even better results with this product over time. The application of the bottom system begins with masking off the waterline. We started by running the waterline using 3M blue vinyl tape. This will leave us a nice crisp edge as we roll our last coat of bottom paint after the application of our primer coat. We then stepped 1-inch 3M 233 plus masking tape down about 1/4 inch. We do this to cover up our primer edge as so you don't see the change in colors between the bottom paint and the primer. The men applied 3 coats of Tough Stuff primer, letting the last coat dry just until you can leave a thumbprint. They then removed the 1-inch tape, revealing the blue vinyl tape, which will be our final edge on the application of our bottom paint. They immediately began the application of the bottom paint, which consists of 3 rolled coats. The great thing about ablative bottom systems is the recoating process. Be sure to give the bottom a good pressure wash after each season of use. Will leave you the surface where, you may have to scuff a few areas here and there, but the surface will be ready to accept a fresh coat of bottom paint after a little prep and proper maintenance. Now that the bottom paint system is done, it's time to get the boat back together, detailed, which will be a little bit of both going on at the same time. And we'll do that when we return after this break. Hello, welcome back. Well, even though we had a good amount of the interior already back together prior to paint, we needed to hook back up the electrical as well as the entertainment center prior to installing the refrigerator, microwave, and the rest of our interior components. We quickly completed those tasks and immediately began to see light at the end of the tunnel with the completion of our interior. And we excitedly moved on to the exterior hardware, starting with the rub rail install. And who better of a person to do that than our elder in the group, and that is Mr. Gary Wilson. A little background on Mr. Wilson. At 16 years old, he went to work for this boat building company in Rockland, Massachusetts, called, you guessed it, Boston Whaler. By the time Gary was 20 years old, he was the lead fabricator for the government and commercial division of Boston Whaler. So needless to say, he's installed a few rub rails on whalers in his time. However, even he'll tell you, back then, they didn't use hard, rigid rub rails like they use today. Most of the rub rails back then were in fact rubber, hence rub rail. No, that's fake news, but it sounded good, didn't it? The rubber rub rails were and are a lot easier to install than today's rigid vinyl rub rails. Rigid are more difficult making bends that you need to heat the product up so it makes those bends, ensuring it looks factory. So what better person than the man himself, Gary Wilson. The rigid rub rail sections come in 20-foot sections and very much need two people working together closely, as well as your fair share of jigs to hold it in place. Because as you heat the rub rail sections to make these bends, any pressure in the wrong direction will warp or distort beyond repair. Working with Joe, Gary went around the perimeter and installed the rigid sections to the hull to deck joint. After being sure all these joints were flush smooth, he then began the installation to his 1-inch stainless insert, which we'll absolutely thank Boston Whaler for providing us the two aft sections. Pre-bent for Boston Whaler by their rub rail manufacturer, Barbour Plastic Products, which is in fact only a few towns away from here in Brockton, Massachusetts. The gentleman that runs that division is Mark Demers. He's known as the rub rail guy. The number of manufacturers that use their product is too long to list. Mark's been providing Metan's rub rail products for our restorations for the last 20 years, as well as providing the rub rails for our Metan Classic collections. Yes, this was a little plug for Mark, who deserves it, that he's truly an expert with the product that he's provided the industry for decades. Gary finished up the installation of the stainless insert by hand tightening each screw, yes, leaving all perpendicular in position. Hey, that's making it Metan. And speaking of making it Metan, when we return, stay with Gary as he goes through the polishing process of some of the stainless steel components as we work through the assembly of our 420. So stay tuned. And welcome back as we wind down the repair to Humpty Dumpty. I call it this because we released an Instagram video shortly before we went into paint, and it became the Humpty Dumpty video on social media.
Humpty Dumpty washed up on a wall during a hurricane sometime last fall. Forget the king's horsemen, forget the king's men, because here comes Metan to make the men.
To date, it's received like 100,000 views. The funny thing is, I made the video one night at 3 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep. Hey, the power of social media. From the very beginning, we worked with Boston Whaler Parts through the dealer in Texas, accumulating the many different parts and accessories needed to reassemble this vessel. However, there were a few parts that we were either shorted in receiving, or removing those parts would have done way more damage than good. One of those parts that we didn't want to remove was the large bow eye protector plate, and one of the large parts was the anchor, which Gary knew he can make them new again. And he did just that. Gary began the steps of grinding and sanding out the deeper imperfections in the stainless plate. He then began buffing and polishing through the process, just as he does on the welds to our stainless steel pipe work. Another small but a bit of a headache of a part was a through hull that we were short 1 out of 5 of these very unique, small midship through hulls. If you notice, they have a very small flange. You can see, boy, they were pretty messed up too. Well, unfortunately, we fell short on one. So Gary took the meticulous time to sand down, grind the surface, and then go through the same polishing steps that he did on the bigger pieces. Man, he brought that thing right back to new. In the end, you tell me which one of those 5 through hulls is new or refurbished. The level of craftsmanship speaks for itself when you see and witness the before and after results of his amazing work. Although we don't have all that much detailed footage, but another part of the assembly process that took careful thought and precision was the installation of the glass ports. Remember Scotty's amazing body work up in that area? Being sure that the many lines that were coming together were all exactly where they needed to be? Knowing these ports followed those same lines, if those lines were off, the ports would be off. And that's how come the body work is so important. And man, he had them dead balls on. So to get these installed, Scotty first masked off around the port areas, and with very low pressure, he applied multiple coats of this special primer that promotes the adhesion of the glue we use to permanently install the panels back in place. Well, not permanently, because between Hurricane Harvey and Metan, we got them off, but I think you get the point. The next few steps of gluing and holding them in place is where I fall short in video, that I needed to jump in with all hands on deck, that we had a very short working time limit with our adhesive. It was imperative that we hold the panels in place for the allotted time for our glue to cure. With the glue being black and the primer coat also being black, the primer hid any signs of the glue. Although the ports were smoked glass, it was still translucent. So if we didn't have that black background, you would have actually been able to see the beads of sealant. Well, once again, the results speak for themselves, that the installation of these ports came out perfect and was another realization for all of us on how close we were to being finished with this tremendous repair. Now stay with us, because when we come back, you'll see the final conclusion of this repair, right down to pulling into North Shore Marina in Rockport, Texas, as our Boston Whaler 420, in fact, goes on the road back. And we're back. And yes, it's happening. The repairs to the 420 Outrage are complete. Accessories and hardware installed. And now, the single most important phase of the entire project is yet to be completed. And that phase is making it, no, I'm not going to say it, but I was going to say it, like we were never there. And that means vacuuming, scrubbing, detailing, every nook and cranny of the vessel, being sure that there is no leftover dust, grime, grit. Again, like we were never there. We then compounded, buffed, polished all the other surfaces of the boat, because everything we touched now looks brand new. Although this boat only had 26 hours on it when it came to us, it did weather a hell of a storm. And we are in fact making it like a hurricane never happened. See what we go through to truly make it Metan? The 420 also had some T components that weathered, not so much from the storm, but also being covered in the fiberglass shop for 8 months. One of those T components was the forward T deck table. After a good scrubbing with Part A T cleaner and a fresh coat of oil was one of the extra details that needed to bring this vessel truly back to new. Now that we had the vessel detailed, it was time to wrap her up and get her back to Texas. However, before we could put the shrink wrap on this boat, we covered our painted hull surfaces with hull protectant. While Keith and Stanley were covering the hull with the protectant, Joe and Chuck built a low frame that was needed to support the shrink wrap for the 2,000-mile ride back to Texas, so it holds up a little better than it did on its way up here. I wanted to be sure when the vessel arrived in Texas, I'd be able just to cut the shrink wrap right at the rub rail, remove the hull protector, so when Mike and Mark from Sail and Ski showed up, they would see the hull for the first time looking perfect, looking mint. Yes, I'm gonna say it, looking Metan, so they would be truly blown away. Well, that's it to the repair to our 2016 420 Outrage. It's complete, delivered back to Texas. And after having to wait for the boat to be built, then only to have to wait even longer for it to be repaired, the client can finally enjoy what he has now been missing, and that is the performance and the comforts of one of the most amazing Boston whalers ever built. Well, I hope you folks enjoyed the episodes outlining the processes and, as we learned, the phases of not only a fiberglass repair, but a large fiberglass repair. In the beginning of every episode, it's kind of like the Reader's Digest version of Metan's story and how it all came to be, and that is a marine restoration shop. And with restorations being our sole focus, well, over the years, we evolved into what we are today. Going along with restorations came refits, which are kind of like a toned-down version of a restoration, not involving complete structural repairs. It brings back a boat of, say, 20 years to brand new. Always starting, though, with new systems such as electrical, fuel, bilge, pumps, and yes, even motors. Exactly like we do during the restoration process. Then you throw in the cosmetic upgrades and accessories, giving the boat a brand new feel. And along with Metan's 10-year warranty, it truly makes it feel new. So with all that said, our next series of episodes are going to be a combination of a restoration and a refit on the same boat at the same time. Well, not really, because that would be impossible. You'd be like, Mike, what is it? Restoration or a refit? However, when you've been doing this as long as we have, and again, going back to the opening of the show, I talk about how I literally have been taking photos of every project over the years, all switching over to video like 10 years ago. Throughout the next series of episodes, we're going to go back 18 years when our client Steve brought us JB, which was a 1973 Seacraft 23 center console. That was a true family heirloom. It was his dad JB's boat. Well, you're going to be able to follow us through the restoration process of JB dating back 18 years ago. We'll use the many photos that I have, and yes, even some video of when we first restored JB all the way back then. But then we're going to go into modern day, when unfortunately, a few years back, JB took on an early season nor'easter. Now, I won't say JB lost the battle. You'll see in the episodes that this boat became a testimonial of ours when we were not only able to go right through one of our restorations of 18 years ago and see how it held up, but you'll get to see how it held up against one of Mother Nature's ass-kickings, and that is a New England nor'easter. Tearing its T-top off, motor submerged, big hole in the side of it. Yes, here we go with another hole. So join us on the next few episodes as we make It Metan the second time around. Again, thank you for following us through the last few episodes, and thank you for all your comments and questions you had on YouTube and our Instagram page. So follow us and subscribe, and see you next time on Making It Metan.